Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is going to totally flip the script on how we think about our bodies and honestly, our overall health. For decades, we've basically been conditioned to just step on the scale or pinch our waistlines and think of body fat as this passive storage locker for extra calories, just kind of sitting there. But what if I told you that there is a hidden, highly active system operating right now deep inside your abdomen that's quietly driving some of the absolute most serious health conditions of our time? Today, we are unmasking the true nature of visceral fat, and I promise you, it's going to change how you look at your body forever. So, is belly fat just stored energy? Let's just bust a massive misconception right out of the gate. We all kind of tend to view body fat through the exact same lens, right? Assuming it's just this inert stuff waiting around to be burned off during your next treadmill session. But the science tells a radically different story. Not all fat is created equal. Actually, scratch that. It's completely different depending on where it is. Where your body decides to store that fat literally changes everything about how it interacts with your biology. Belly fat is an active rogue organ. Yeah, the biological truth is super fascinating, but honestly, it's also a little terrifying. Excess fat deep inside your abdomen isn't just a quiet storage facility, it is a rogue organ. It's kind of like a terrible roommate that just moved in and started trashing the house. It's constantly communicating with your entire body using these complex signaling molecules. I mean, it has its own blood supply, it produces its own hormones, and it literally dictates how your other organs function. To really grasp your metabolic health, we have to entirely stop thinking of fat as just one big uniform tissue. Okay, so think about the fat you can actually physically pinch, like on your arms or your legs or your hips. That is subcutaneous fat. It sits right under the skin and it acts like a battery and a cushion. It actually does useful things for us, like storing energy and providing physical insulation. But then there's visceral fat. This is the hidden enemy packing itself deep inside your core. It surrounds your vital organs, and it's highly dangerous precisely because it is so incredibly metabolically active. So let's define exactly what this hidden enemy is. Visceral fat is deep abdominal fat that literally wraps itself around your liver, your intestines, and your pancreas. Because it acts as an active endocrine organ, it's not just taking up real estate in there. It is actively pumping out chemicals, fatty acids, and hormones directly into your bloodstream, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's the specific nature of those chemicals that makes visceral fat a real game changer when it comes to long-term health damage. Think of this fat as a literal chemical factory. It constantly pumps out these inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines, specifically things with super complicated names like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6. Now, you definitely do not want these compounds just freely floating through your system in high amounts. Why? Because they cause persistent, chronic, low-grade inflammation. This isn't the helpful short-term inflammation you get when your body is healing from, say, a paper cut. This is a continuous, smoldering fire that keeps your immune system stuck on high alert, which the research heavily links to huge issues like heart disease, high blood pressure, and stroke. But wait, the damage goes way beyond just inflammation. We're talking total hormone disruption. Visceral fat actually scrambles your body's communication network. It's like a rogue Wi-Fi signal interfering with your connection. It messes with leptin, which is the hormone that tells your brain, hey, we're full, and regulates energy. It also suppresses adiponectin, a hugely important hormone that supports insulin sensitivity. This total disruption explains exactly why managing your weight feels so incredibly, frustratingly difficult when visceral fat levels are high. Your body's natural appetite regulators are quite literally being hijacked. And that hormone hijacking? It kicks off the insulin-resistance cycle. It's a cascading disaster. First, visceral fat accumulates and fires off those disruptive chemicals. In response, your body's cells basically start ignoring insulin's signal to absorb glucose out of your bloodstream. So your pancreas, sensing that your blood sugar is hanging out way too high, totally panics and overproduces insulin to try and compensate. It's a vicious cycle. Elevated insulin promotes even more fat storage, which creates more resistance, paving a direct paved highway toward prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So, where does all this toxic output actually go? Visceral fat drains directly into the liver's portal vein. And this is where the research gets deeply, deeply alarming. Unlike the fat stored on your legs or arms, this toxic belly fat is hooked directly into your liver's main blood supply. It means your liver is being exposed to a highly concentrated, constant stream of inflammatory compounds and raw fatty acids before they even get a chance to dilute into the rest of your bloodstream. Which means we are totally overloading the liver. As those visceral fat stores expand, they just dump massive amounts of free fatty acids straight in there.
the liver becomes entirely overwhelmed. It just cannot process and export the excess fat fast enough. So, the fat simply begins to accumulate inside the liver cells themselves. Historically, you might have heard this called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but the medical community now calls it metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, or MASLD. Bottom line, it's a flashing red light that your metabolic engine is stalling out.
And all of this internal chaos, the inflammation, the hormone scrambling, the insulin resistance, the overwhelmed liver, it creates this metabolic syndrome cluster. You start to see an increased waistline, climbing blood pressure, high triglycerides, a drop in that good HDL cholesterol, and creeping blood glucose levels. Having this syndrome is a massive red flag. It substantially skyrockets your risk for catastrophic cardiovascular events. We're talking heart attacks and strokes. So a vital question naturally comes up here. Why does visceral fat build up in the first place? Well, it's basically the perfect storm of our modern lifestyle. It's a combination of eating a consistent surplus of calories, especially from those refined, ultra-processed foods that spike our blood sugar. Add in a sedentary routine, where we're just sitting way too much to burn off that energy. Compound all that with sleep deprivation, which alters those appetite hormones we were just talking about, and chronic stress, which spikes cortisol levels and specifically drives fat storage straight to your midsection.
But visceral fat is highly responsive to lifestyle changes. Okay, take a breath, because despite how terrifying visceral fat sounds, here is the empowering solution we've been building toward. The good news is actually incredibly promising. This hidden, dangerous fat is highly responsive to what you do every day. In fact, because it's so metabolically active, it is often much easier and faster to lose than that stubborn, pinchable subcutaneous fat under your skin. Your body actually wants to burn it for fuel if you just give it the right environment.
5%. Just 5%. Literally, that is one of the most motivating numbers you're going to hear today. You do not need to lose some massive, overwhelming amount of weight to see huge, life-changing benefits. The research is crystal clear. Just a 5 to 10% reduction in your total body weight drastically improves your metabolic engine. That small reduction is enough to pull the fat right out of your liver, drop those systemic inflammation levels, and restore your cell's sensitivity to insulin.
All right, so what's the action plan to shrink it? Here is your exact, actionable toolkit straight from the research to diffuse this rogue organ and take your health back. First up, load up on soluble fiber. Think things like oats, beans, and lentils, which naturally improve satiety and blood sugar control. Second, combine aerobic exercise with resistance training. That combo burns the visceral fat while building a metabolic buffer of muscle. Third, build your diet around whole, minimally processed plant foods. And lastly, you absolutely have to prioritize your sleep quality and manage daily stress to keep that belly fat storing cortisol in check.
There's a great quote that just hits the nail on the head. The size of your waistline is not merely a cosmetic concern. It is one of the most powerful windows into the state of your metabolic health. Ultimately, what you should take away from this explainer is a total shift in perspective. We have to stop looking in the mirror and judging ourselves purely on aesthetics. Instead, view your waistline as this incredibly transparent window into your hidden metabolic health. It's an external indicator of your internal environment.
So, what is your waistline telling you about your metabolic engine today? Now that you know the hidden truth about visceral fat, that it is not just passive baggage, but an active, demanding organ, take a really honest look at your own lifestyle. Look at your daily habits, your stress levels, your sleep, the foods you rely on. Ask yourself that vital question. The power to change that signal is entirely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.